Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. We're probably not going to have a ton of fun today because the passage we're looking at is about the hero of the story and the one person who ever it could be said about that they did not deserve it, taking an absolute beating in public after he's already been beaten. And I don't know, it's that's just not light material. It is what it is. What we're looking at in Matthew 27 are the details running up to the crucifixion itself. And as we've talked about, it's really easy to just, you think about Jesus suffering, you're like, oh, the crucifixion, you picture that part of it. But there's a bunch of other stuff on the way that are additional indignities as we've looked at. It seems like maybe each of these indignities points to some theological truth or fulfillment, prediction about what would happen with the Messiah and how this would play out. It all tells a story. It's all in there for a reason, and the abuse is not nearly done yet. So this is what we've been looking at so far. A couple verses earlier, everybody in the crowd, this is not representative of the population of Jerusalem or the Jewish people or the people Jesus had talked to. These are the people who were incentivized and whipped into a frenzy to go to this crowd and make all of this noise. Side note, that's a really important thing to bear in mind anytime it looks like you have public consensus, is that usually only a certain subset of people are properly motivated or available to turn out to give the impression of consensus. There were a whole lot of people who clearly supported Jesus who were just doing other stuff, maybe weren't aware of the hubbub, or maybe felt like they would be killed if they didn't go along with the public narrative, so they just didn't show up or do anything. Whatever the case, this crowd in Matthew 27, they demand that Barabbas be released and that Jesus be crucified. The religious leaders are like, hey, we don't care about your suggestion that you don't bear guilt for this, Pilate. We want that guilt. Put it on us and our kids. We are totally committed. We're all in. We're buying in. And Pilate's like, whatever. And he turns Jesus over to be crucified. Now, the crucifixion process has some other stuff that goes along with it. Did Pilate specifically order each of these things to happen? Or was this just part and parcel, and by Pilate giving the old thumbs up, this is just what automatically happened? I do not know the answer to that. But what I do know is that we start with Jesus getting flogged. We talked a lot about what those injuries would look like. This is not a light warm-up. This is enough to kill an adult who's strong and healthy because of blood loss, because of sheer pain. It would have become difficult to move or breathe after going through this. People died from the flogging alone. But then it goes on to say that all these soldiers gather around, and in verse 28 it says they strip him and they put a scarlet robe on him and they twist together a crown of thorns, so more bleeding. Then they put a staff in his right hand and kneel in front of him and mock him, saying, "Hail to the King of the Jews." Then they spit on him and took the staff, and this is where it gets a little bit Lord of the Flies-ish. They all start hitting him in the head again and again with the staff. How does it exactly say? They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they'd mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him, and then they led him away to crucify him. Have you ever seen any of those videos that make the rounds on Twitter, the internet in general, where people just go absolutely feral? Some giant fight in an airport or a school classroom or a mall or a public street, and you just look at it and you think, how can humanity be that broken? What has to go wrong? You can't picture yourself in that kind of a situation at all. And it makes you feel this gross feeling in your stomach, this feeling of despair, but you kind of can't look away because you're gripped by the commentary this provides on a culture that you feel some degree of ownership in helping to craft. Well, I feel like what's going on right here is sort of your first century AD equivalent. It's not enough to do all the other things we've already done to Jesus. We're literally doing the thing where he's laying there in a heap, already bleeding like crazy, already humiliated. And now we're going to take that staff that a moment ago was being used to represent royalty, a mockery of the idea of a king holding a scepter, which symbolizes his authority as shepherd and governor over the people he rules. And now we're going to flip that imagery around and beat him in the head with it over and over again. It literally says, struck him on the head again and again. I don't think it's too hard to read a whole bunch of different images or symbols or meanings or metaphors into that, and probably most of the ones that you could read into that are pretty accurate. The true king should be wielding that staff, not taking a public Lord of the Flies style beating in front of everybody for their amusement from that staff. And then on top of that, we're not going to let him wear that kingly robe up there onto the cross. No, we're going to shame him further up there on the cross by stripping him down to basically nothing. So it looks like Jesus is going to have to do the rest of his walk without those kingly robes and instead wearing whatever he had on when he was initially arrested, which I guess would be whatever he had on in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I guess that would still be whatever he had on at the night of the Last Supper. I suppose if Judas had gone and tidied himself up for the event of betraying Jesus out there and maybe splashed on a little bit of cologne, maybe Judas got close enough to leave a little whiff of some fancy fragrance he maybe skimmed some money from the coffers to be able to afford. Maybe Jesus could still smell that specific betrayal as they peeled this robe off of the blood that so badly wanted to scab to it and pulled over the top this clothing that Jesus had been wearing for some time. And bear in mind, all of this is before they crucify him. This is just the warm-up. Now, ultimately, they're going to divide up his garments, and Jesus isn't going to go to the cross all clothed and dignified. They're going to strip him down to pretty much nothing. Because remember, this isn't just about the most efficient way to kill someone. There are much more efficient ways to kill someone than what they're doing here. I'm told, having never participated in killing someone, I'm just kind of doing the math here from a distance. But no, bear in mind, the point is to make an example. The point is to have a jape, a laugh, a jest, to keep the masses entertained, to sate their lust for blood and flesh just a little bit, and to make an absolute laughingstock mockery of the notion that anyone could be a true king, that anyone could be in authority over Rome, or that Rome would answer to anyone. Thus, Jesus is going to get peeled out of clothes that are scabbing to that blood one more time before he gets sent up on the cross. But along the way, he's going to meet somebody who's got a famous name that you've no doubt heard somewhere along the way. We're going to talk about him and why we get this little aside with Simon of Cyrene next time around. Thank you for enduring the dour tone. It's a dour passage. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.